as last time.
Mm-hmm. Hello, Evolutionary Energy Arts family. How are you guys today?
Hello, guys. Can you guys hear us? I think. Hey, okay, cool. Hey there, guys. Crazy, crazy, crazy stuff that YouTube is always doing. I don't know what they're doing, but they're either just trying to screw at some of us, or they changed their whole system again without letting us know. And yes, Cindy came out doing it. And so, yeah, it's weird because they changed it all again. And you can't adjust like the time. I did adjust it to start like at, another 6 minutes. But it just goes on its own.
It does. It just starts recording almost like it's some sort of a AI thing in there, and it decides when it can record or when it wants to, and it just does.
Namaste, brother Asaduzaman, source EXREX or RXE, yes, but source. And we have conscious creators in the house, Energies 1111, Annie Luhu, Jason, Nicole, Christine MacArthur, good to see you, Mary, DG57, Knowledge 2020.
And there's Sir Kenny Crowder, and so nice to meet Cha. And Little Flower. Oh, and White Chick 22. It's so great. Oh, and there's our energies. Hi, hello, hello, hello.
So I got a lot of stuff jam-packed in here to touch on, and some of it you might have heard before, some of it maybe not. There's a lot of different, there's no coincidences, as we were saying before. Synchronicities, yes. Or how about just things that have been just completely laid out and planned for a long time?
Yeah, there's, years and years or hundreds of years. And, what they have that we don't is they have experience.
And let's just, throw this out there too. Again, I think most of you guys would agree if I asked you, do you think there's technology that's hidden that we don't know about that would perhaps surprise a lot of us? How many of you guys think there's technology that's, 20, 30, 50 years ahead?
Oh, there's got to be. It only makes sense. And by the time we get to it, they've perfected it and, they know how to sell it to the masses, but they still keep a big chunk of these technologies hidden away for control purposes later. That's how I feel.
So Phoenix Rain touched on something there. Time travel tech, perhaps. Is it time travel? Is it what is it? Is it just all perfectly orchestrated? As we've touched on before, there's a lot of interesting things. A lot. And then what about the ET factor, the extraterrestrial interdimensional being factor as well? I think is just absolutely overwhelming evidence. They've been here as long as we have been here. As far as we know, they've always been here, perhaps, way before we were here. And there's definitely an influence on the planet by these beings that are not Homo sapiens sapiens.
No, and like the Greys, a lot of the Greys, I feel like their biological entities are kind of like AI and really disturbing because these entities do what they're told. They take orders and they do what it takes to follow the orders.
Yeah, I'm so lucky and blessed to have Cindy here to just go ahead and ask questions directly to the guides and get the answers. And that's a real big blessing for sure. And it's just amazing when we look at if we talk about the Kardashev scale, which talks about different classifications for different types of civilizations, and how much tech they would have. If we are looking at beings that are millions of years ahead of us, most definitely they could look like gods, but not be gods, but definitely have the technology that would just blow our minds away. Perhaps time travel is one of them. Perhaps, multiple, being able to control timelines as well. And it's pretty wild as we've talked about the Merkaba, for instance, and so many people's light bodies are coming on as we have 111 people, 111, okay, 112 now. So many people's diamond bodies, their Merkabas are coming online, which are going to help to bring us to full multidimensionality and maybe level the playing field in so many ways.
In a lot of ways, and we need to trust our instincts with that, and it really truly does help if you change your diet, eat organic food, get rid of the sugars, get rid of the processed foods, because they create like a hindrance for your light body to come in.
Exactly, and I like John Ward's statement, proof of extraterrestrials are in every civilization's legends, every one of them, in the Bible as well. And when we start to do comparative studies, then it gets to be pretty obvious. It really does. There's like, it's this most simple and obvious explanation to all these different things we see going on.
There is, and they put it in the Bible and they make it look like there's these really cool magical things that happen, but really we're looking at AI and really we're looking at them describing spaceships, but they don't explain that to you when you're going to church.
And there's our brother Soul, Netsaya, in the house. And, I was thinking of you making this one because I didn't put it in the title because I wasn't sure if we're going to get that far because I put a lot of stuff up to talk about. But he's been wanting to talk about Fatima, I know, for a long time. So we have some of that up there as well. One thing I'll share with you guys, too, is I've shared before, my dad was brought up devout Catholic. His only schooling was Catholic school. All the grade school through graduating high school was Catholic school. And he grew up in California, although his father was from Mexico. And he, along with his sister and brother Ben, actually did see what they thought was the Virgin Mary. So every time I think of Fatima and the vision, I think of my dad too, because, well, it would have been like 1930 is when he would have had that experience. And it was always hit me as interesting because he was brought up devout Catholic, but he had no doubts about aliens. He knew, and he didn't really ever much elaborate on how he knew. I suspect it's because he had encounters like I have and Cindy has, but he had absolutely no doubts about ETs.
Well, people, when you go to church and you get indoctrinated, you're taught that there is nothing but like human beings, and any thought other than that, you're going to burn in hell. So people didn't entertain those thoughts. They didn't entertain things that they might think could go against their belief system.
Yeah. So I want to share a lot with you guys. First off, recognize the United States as a corporation. And you've probably heard people talk about this, but it's the truth. It's the absolute truth. And as this says, and this is out of Freedom School, but I have other ones too for you to look at. And it all links down to a very interesting year, which we're going to talk about, 1871. The Act of 1871, the U.S. became a corporation. And part of the Civil War, and a major part of the Civil War, was all about bankrupting the growing United States in order for the bankers to go ahead and sink their teeth in and get complete control over everything, which is really what's been, it's been status quo now for, 140 years or something, 150 years. So yeah, we are not really living in a country with a government of the people, by the people, for the people, but we're part of a giant corporation. It's the United States Corporation, and the President of America is the CEO. We're only really the employees when you get down to it. We have our numbers. We're all numbered, Social Security. So, it's the mark of the beast numbering system right there, right? We are only the employees. This corporation, in turn, is owned by another corporation, the British Crown. Have you guys heard that? Is this new to anybody, or is this just blowing your mind, or yeah, you just know it?
Either you just know it, or maybe it is brand new information. But I think this information is out there, but what keeps people from actually letting it penetrate into their belief system is a lot of the stuff they feed us. Our diets actually numb the brain, and they numb the pineal gland, and they make it so people are really nonchalant. They're like, oh, that's nice, and this is how they control us.
So let's look at this, guys. About 89% of Canada's land area is Crown land. 41% is federal Crown land. 48% is provincial Crown land. And then 11% of Canada is open to be privately owned. So, okay, the Crown owns 89% of Canadian land. Do you ever wonder why it's so expensive in Canada with so much land? Well, it's because it's not owned by the people, for the people either. And, there's states in here too. If you look at BLM lands and say, take Nevada because it's the highest percentage. And, the land that is owned by the government in Nevada is almost 86% of Nevada. So about 14% of Nevada is open to people like you and me to actually go ahead and buy. But it goes along with the whole thing with the Canadian lands, which, goes down to, well, who's really owning all this? Well, the U.S. corporation, who is owned by the British Crown, who is owned by who? Well, it comes back to the usual culprits. It ultimately traces down to the same bloodlines, these same family groups. And, we're still living in a feudal society. So, next time we see politicians, should we get down on our knees and say, my lady and my lord? Is that what getting down on your knee is all about? Think about the symbolism. Putting the mask over your face just to shut up the common people. We're not going to listen to you anymore. It's getting pretty out there.
Yeah, it's getting out there, and it's getting obvious. And the things that they do to let themselves be known, or at least let people in the know what they're doing, is numerology. You see a lot of statistics, and when you see that good old number 33, you know that they're up to something, or they're behind something, and they find very creative ways to let it be known what they're doing behind the scenes. It's really quite nasty.
Yeah, so approximately 92% of Western Australia is Crown land. So, this is something that people might not understand. It's part of this whole thing that we're seeing. So corporations rule the world. Corporations rule the world. And again, this is getting through to how much power do you think a president could have when he's the CEO? CEOs could be replaced. CEOs work for the corporation. It's all an illusion. It's all a complete illusion. And, it's been hijacked. It's been completely hijacked at this point. So that was all created by the Banking Act of 1871. 1871 was a very interesting year, a super interesting year. So the Act of 1871. The United States Corporation operates under private international law with their own corporate constitution. And again, the sun still doesn't set on the quote unquote British Empire, at least the British Crown's empire.
Right. There's a lot to that. There's a lot of things that we don't understand and we don't know because they haven't taught us. They haven't put it in front of us and told us plainly, okay, this is what you're truly dealing with. No, they've given us an illusion, something that we can live with from day to day. But when you dig just a little bit, you start seeing the truth. And the truth can be very difficult to accept. Like a lot of people won't even pay attention, those that are asleep. They don't want to have to go back and relearn everything they thought they knew. That's very difficult on the ego, and it's really hard to do. And I feel like a lot of us here and in the chat room, we've already gone through that process of burying the ego. Okay, this is what I thought I knew, but it's not true. And that's difficult for people.
And now this is actually at CIA.gov, and I brought it up in half a dozen different videos. And it's a bloodlines of the Illuminati. And again, this is from the CIA, actually, their own little library there. Gets into the different families, and a lot of you guys might know them. The Astor family, John Jacob Astor, and these are your bloodlines that we could trace back. They would tell you that they are children of the Anunnaki gods. Is what gives them their claim. So when you look at some of the companies that come out of these people, it's Chase Manhattan Bank, American Express. It goes on and on. They control, as we know, all the mainstream media, and there's others as well: Rothschilds, DuPonts, Rockefellers, the Kennedy family, the Onassis family, the Lee family in China. It goes on, and we've touched on some of the people that have been under their control, and some of the 33rd degree Masons, such as Charles Darwin, and the founders of the Jehovah's Witnesses, as well as the founders of the Mormon Church. They all are tied in together. This is all part of controlling society, controlling the mindset, controlling the belief system of people, controlling the ideology, both religious and political. And they've also, as we have here, Albert Pike's 3 World Wars in 1871. Well, is he a time traveler too? 1871. Well, he didn't make it to see World War 1, 2, or 3. Well, that's going to be on the menu very soon, as we know. All planned out. And just think about it. When we look at biblical prophecy about the Jews returning to Israel, and when we realize that who was instrumental in that, who. If it wasn't for what family line would that not have happened? It's the Rothschilds. Look to the Balfour Declaration. 1871, the Act of 1871, U.S. is a corporation. And so we had our Constitution, which they've torn to shreds, and there's been so many different executive orders that have taken away every little ounce of freedom that we ever had, since this period of time, and since 9/11 especially. And now with the medical 9/11 going on, and what's next is a nuclear 9/11 on the agenda. We also had the Great Chicago Fire of 1871. And isn't this an interesting depiction? I've shown this several times. It shows a saucer-shaped UFO beaming down. Is that a dew? Is that a directed energy weapon? And look at the fire going. I thought it was Mrs. O'Leary's cow kicking the lamp. Maybe not. Maybe this came from some sort of executive order from the controllers of the Illuminati themselves. And maybe there were certain people eliminated in this, certain documents eliminated in this fire. It's just really interesting. And we could touch on the Titanic. And it was really fascinating fascinating about the unsinkable ship. That's how they labeled it. Unsinkable, right? It couldn't sink. Well, for one, it did sink. For two, they didn't have enough lifeboats to cover everybody. And, many of us have seen the movie The Titanic. Do you know who was on this? You had Benjamin Guggenheim. You might have heard of the Guggenheim Museum. He opposed creating a Federal Reserve Bank. Of course, J.P. Morgan, along with Lord Rothschild, they were the guys that orchestrated the quote-unquote Federal Reserve, which is not federal at all. It's these same guys. It's the same family. Of course, he's passed on now, and that Lord Rothschild's been replaced by another Lord Rothschild. But still, the family lines control it. And the Federal Reserve is not federal at all. It's them. It's the same families that we are talking about, those same families. So you had a banking panic back in 1907, and then, of course, orchestrated. All these things are always orchestrated. Create a problem, offer the solution you want the masses to take. And, there are some really good used car salesmen out there, and these are some of the best. And not to put down anybody that's selling cars, because I wouldn't want to equate you to these beings there. So Guggenheim opposed the Fed. He didn't want to create a Federal Reserve Bank. Same thing with Issa Strauss. Same thing with Jacob Astor. Even in Illuminati families, we can sometimes see people that speak up against things. Take Kennedy. JFK, the Kennedy family is an Illuminati family. But we all know what happened to him. And so all three of these guys were on the Titanic when it sank. Is that just a coincidence? Or can we say a false flag? Or can we say part of the plan?
Yeah, a lot of it. It's just more and more part of the plan. And luckily right now we have a lot of information on the internet, so we can do some digging. I do feel like they're having kind of a cyber book burning where they're getting rid of information. Like when we were pulling stuff up for the show tonight, there were certain things that kept disappearing, and it just really made me feel like we were on the Truman Show. It's like, really, you guys, seriously? And it gets to be a little bit comical, but they really truly have used our belief systems and even like the way we were raised as children and how we parent as parents to manipulate us in a way that falls right into their control mechanism. As we awaken, more and more and more of us awaken and understand what they have done, it gets a little more dangerous for them. So they have to like up the ante and create a little more chaos and a little more chaos to try to drown out the awakening.
And that's exactly what's going on, because they're going to lose their grip on power. And so will the dark forces that are giving them their power. It's a fascinating, very, very, very tangled web we weave. And then we get to this fun. And, as I had mentioned before, so, is President Trump and his family, are they all time travelers? What's up with this? Is it just a coincidence? Or is Ingersoll Lockwood in the know? Is he either part of the Illuminati? And I got to do more research on that. He does have an interesting background. I've done a little. So is he part of the Illuminati and having fun just putting this stuff out there? Is he extremely intuitive? Was this a download from some of the good guys to just give us clues and a warning? Or is this a download from the bad guys to give us more misdirection? It's really wild. You can't make this stuff up. This is from the 1890s. Baron Trump's marvelous underground journey, and it does get into all sorts of interesting stuff. And there was a comment about you talk about extraterrestrials a lot, and even interdimensionals, but how about the inner Earth people? And that's true, because we need probably to cover in greater depth things like Agartha and Shambhala and Shangri-La and more other beings that are probably on the inside of the earth, because that's another explanation. Although I do believe that there are beings from many other locations here. They didn't even have to be if, as I had a great a couple really good discussions with David from Adapt 2030 about this. The fact that what if there were some civilizations that knew when these cataclysms come every 12,000 years about, and they were able to go in for the last 2 or 3 cycles, just the last 2 or 3. And so they maintained their technology. Say they were at the level we are now 40,000 years ago. Can you imagine the abilities they would have now? Again, even these humans, if they were just completely humans, no other species involved, they would have the powers of the quote-unquote gods.
They sure would, and I've seen some technologies. I've read a little bit about these technologies, these things called med beds, and you lay in them and they detect what is wrong in your human body, and they can actually go and create from the ether or plasma, or use whatever magic they use, and create things to help fix your human body and repair it, make it back to new, so you can continue on. And they're quite miraculous. They can, perform kind of weird surgeries where they don't really have to do any cutting. These med beds are pretty amazing, and they're said to be coming up, to be available to folks like us in the near future. I don't think they'll really ever be available to us. I think we're going to find a different way, as far as anti-aging is concerned. Something else is going to come up, but I do believe that they use these beds because the detail in them was really, really super honed. I mean, there's so much detail. It just made so much sense. And it would be nice to live in a world where that they did offer these med beds, but maybe not for us this time, but who knows? We're just really not sure. There's just so much out there. How can we hang our hats on knowledge that, might not be true, because that's how it's been growing up for all of us. So many things have changed. So when we learn one thing, we can't really hang our ego on that because it could change. So being flexible is the best way to be.
This is just, it's so fascinating when we look at this. And I do have the complete works, and it's right over here, of Ingersoll Lockwood. I've only read The Last President so far, so I still gotta read The Travels and Adventures of Little Baron Trump and Baron Trump's Marvelous Underground Journey. I just can't wait to do it. Actually, it was really a quick read. I read it in one sitting as far as the 1900 The Last President, and because of the times that we're in, I was just completely enthralled. I was just hanging on every word. And it was really curious. It really makes you wonder, we know history's rewritten. Would they go to the trouble to plant stuff like this, saying, that they're not time travelers and not taking into consideration even ETs or anything like that, and change everything that we could look up on the net and reprogram it so that, this all looks like it was really written way back then, but it wasn't. You got to wonder, because how about mud floods? How about Tartaria? I mean, there's just so much scrubbed and not enough info out there on it. And when I was looking now, because the last time I brought up that photo of the UFO with the Great Chicago Fire, there was a lot of them to choose from. And there were links and more stories talking about this whole quote-unquote conspiracy. Now, there's not that much out there. They are, like Cindy was alluding to, they are purging things. They are clearing them out as we speak. So much information is being just torn away from us. So this is Newsweek. Did an author from the 1800s predict the Trumps, Russia, and America's downfall? Ingersoll Lockwood, the American political writer, lawyer, and novelist, combined a unique mixture of science fiction and fantasy into his novels from the late 1800s. Two of his most popular works of literature were illustrated children's stories, focusing on a very peculiar fictional character whose name rings a bell in 2017 and to this day, Baron Trump. Trump, an aristocratically wealthy young man living in Castle Trump, Trump Castle, Trump. If you're looking back in the timelines, you might say, Dracula's castle is just par for the course with, a certain time. Is it just a coincidence, or is there something more there? So he's the protagonist of Lockwood's first two fictional novels, The Travels and Adventures of Little Baron Trump and his wonderful dog, Bulger, and Baron Trump's marvelous underground journey. The little boy, who has an unending imagination and very active brain, is bored of the luxurious lifestyle he has grown so accustomed to. Well, I guess, President Trump and his son Baron Trump both have a very luxurious lifestyle. You must be a little bit bored to want to take on being the president, and also kind of, it could be interesting. So, in a twist of fate, Trump visits Russia, and we know all about that fiasco, right? Russian interference in the election, to embark on an extraordinary adventure that will shape the rest of his life. And Lockwood's final novel arrived in 1896, titled The Last President. What do you want to bet that Trump is the last president of the United States as we know it? I'll lay money on that one. I would seriously lay money on that one. I almost feel like there's no doubt. And it's just fascinating. There are some incredible connections to be made for the first family of the United States and Lockwood's novels from the turn of the 19th century. For starters, the main character's name is the same as President Donald Trump's son, albeit spelt differently. Trump's adventures begin in Russia and are guided thanks to directions provided by the master of all masters, a man named Don, D-O-N. Before leaving for his voyage through the unknown, he is told of his family's motto: the pathway to glory is strewn with pitfalls and dangers. Illustrations from the novels depict Trump dressed in lavish, old-fashioned clothing and jewelry as he departs from Castle Trump Castle, and begins his voyage headed to Russia to locate an entrance into alternate dimensions. This stuff is so cool. But Lockwood's third novel, The Last President, things become even more eerily linked to the present day. Oh yeah. Story begins with a scene from a panicked New York City in early November 3rd, by the way. And our election is November 3rd, by the way, this year as well. Describing a state of uproar after the election of an enormously opposed outsider candidate. The entire East Side is in a state of uproar. Police officers shouted through the streets, warning folk to stay indoors for the night. Mobs of vast size are organizing under the lead of anarchists and socialists. Wow, Antifa and BLM, or CCP funded people, and threaten to plunder and despoil the houses of the rich who have wronged and oppressed them for so many years. The Fifth Avenue Hotel will be the first to feel the fury of the mob, the novel continues, citing an address in New York City where Trump Tower now stands. Can you get this? Are you feeling this? Would the troops be in time to save Trump Tower? Interesting, yeah. Lockwood's creations have resurfaced online in recent weeks on forums and on Reddit thanks to a number of 4chan users who shared images and conspiracy theories about the fantasy stories. Some claim the Trump family possesses a time machine that has allowed them to remain in power to this day. Now, The Last President doesn't follow the same fictional narrative of Lockwood's previous novels, though the links to Trump are once and again abundantly clear. The president's hometown in New York City is fearing the collapse of the Republic in this book, also entitled 1900 Pennsylvania Avenue. And immediately following the transition of presidential power, some Americans begin forming a resistance, protesting what was seen as a corrupt and unethical election process. Then a filmmaker and Trump supporter, Lee Scott, is now trying to crowdsource funding to create a fantasy feature film. But what goes on is that, and I do have, okay, there we go. It's just a photo of it, but I do have a PDF, so you guys could read it if you so choose to. Basically, what happens is time runs out, and there's a big speech trying to save the Union, and the president's there when it's supposed to be just basically Congress there, and the president interrupts it, and time runs out on making some sort of provisions that might hold the Union together, and the book ends basically with just an explosion and the Capitol, the White House, being blown up, and what feels like the shots of the shots of a new civil war ringing out. So very, very ominous. Is that a foreshadowing to what's coming as we look at Baron Trump and Little Baron Trump? Interesting. A lot of people say there's a lot of similarity. I guess you could see it. A little bit chubbier over here on the cheeks, but what do you think?
Oh gosh, I see the huge resemblance there. There's so many things that book brought up that are parallel to not just what's happening now, but looks like it could happen in the future.
Yeah, it's really, really, it's wild. It's just wild. Trump Castle, Castle Trump. There's little excerpts here. So the Underground Journey book came out in 1893, so they say, and this is the PDF. And as you can see, it's got like all stamps on it. And I don't know. I don't know. It's very, very curious. Copyright 1896, to say the least. Now, talking about more things that just coming together to tell us, yes, we are in that timeline where it's been spoken of, and we've talked about the Hopi, we've talked about the Book of Revelation, and this is Saint Malachi. So Saint Malachi was an Irish saint that gave us 112 little lines describing each one of the popes that were to come. Now, when it was first printed, already there had been quite a few that had already come and gone. So some people don't take this as being legit. It is curious that some of these descriptions are pretty much right on, and other ones you got to look for it. But the big thing to take from this is that as far as number 112, well, that's the Pope we have right now. So, if you're going numerically, this would be the last Pope. Now, it doesn't really seem to mesh with what he described, unless you're just taking it symbolically, and we'll look into this. So he was a 12th century bishop in Ireland, and after Pope Benedict, he said there would be just one more. And then other people are scrambling and saying, well, maybe he omitted some and he's just putting in the real important ones. But really what he talks about is judgment coming and the end of the church, and also the destruction of Rome, which according to, if you take his 112 Pope list literally, and we are on number 112, it'll happen in the lifetime of this Pope, who is a man that's, I don't know if he's in his 80s yet, but he's definitely in his 70s. So it's in that same, time frame as what we're seeing now. So you see, in the final persecution of the Holy Roman Church, there will reign Peter the Roman, who will feed his flock amid many tribulations, after which the seven-hilled city will be destroyed, and the dreadful judge will judge the people. The end. So that's kind of ominous, and in so many ways. But again, it's about the church. So it is also about the fact that the time of the 112th Pope, which would again be the Pope that we have right now, that would be the time of tribulation, and also again the destruction of the church. So what if we're looking at the realization of exactly what's really going on in the world being exposed? Like if we did get the acknowledgement that there are extraterrestrials, they've been here the whole time, and it comes out about the Anunnaki, and even if Enki or Enlil or Ningashita or Marduk come right out in the open and say, hey, what's up? I think that would be kind of the end of the Catholic Church, because, what would be the point, so to speak? Maybe people would look and say, well, maybe we didn't take Christ's message exactly as it should have been taken. Maybe we should have looked more along the lines of it's really the Christ consciousness within each of us that needs to be cultivated, as opposed to the worshiping of, that we see, the whole system of worship that we see with the church, which again was created by Constantine, who was, the emperor of the quote-unquote Holy Roman Empire. He was a man that was about power, and in fact, he actually executed his first wife and his son, all about power. And so this is the man that gave us this dogma and gave us the Catholic Church, which has gone on throughout time. And actually, there's been many atrocities by many of the popes, and some have openly warred and even killed. And these are the vicars of Christ. These are, obviously, when we look at the wealth of the Catholic Church, it's enormously wealthy. And, Christ told the rich man's son, if you really want to go all the way, sell everything, give it to the poor, and follow me with what you have on your back. Well, that's not what the Catholic Church has done. And I know a lot of people will bring up and say, well, they do so many good humanitarian things, but how much wealth are they sitting on? How much power do they really, really have and have exerted? So, it could be that we wake up and people just leave the Catholic Church in droves, or even leave so many of our established religions and simply become more spiritual.
Which would be the best thing to do, but we have to kind of crack open that protective barrier that people hide behind, where they're being told that, we're the only beings here, we are the children of God and there is nothing else. And even our science tells us, no, there's no aliens. There's nothing like that around here. But I think until that really gets cracked wide open, people are going to struggle at church. And it makes me feel sad for them, because they're just completely chained down in their mind. They have nowhere to go. They think that book is everything.
Yeah, but as we have said too, there were over 200 Gospels, and they only picked 4. And one of the things that I wasn't aware of until recently, that Matthew 17 through 21, that whole section is not in any of the oldest writings that we have. So there's a lot of stuff that's been uncovered as well, a lot of stuff that's been buried. And, again, there's a lot of things that don't make sense. We see Pope Benedict is ill, but his condition is not serious. So he's number 111 on the list. And here is a list. Now, he is Glory of the Olive. A lot of people talk of John Paul II, who was from the Labor of the Sun. And there was a lot of things that made sense there, too. Now, John Paul II... how many people know, and I've talked about this before, that he used to work for IG Farben? IG Farben is tied to the Bushes. IG Farben is a company that made the gas for the gas chambers. And he was a salesman for that company before becoming Pope during World War II. Things are tied together here. We are controlled again through our religion. We are controlled again through our politics and kept at each other's throats. And so I wanted to just bring that up. And when I was talking about in print, like Malachi's prophecy first didn't go in print until 1550, I think 1560. There was no printing presses until 1440. So a lot of things were handwritten. And if you look at the oldest scripture that we have of the book of Revelation itself, for instance, it is most likely dated to about 300 AD, somewhere around 250 to 300 AD. And it has numerous edits to it, as do the oldest scriptures we have. So, we could recognize that things have been covered up. Perhaps, when we look at some of the quotes of Christ, as we've said many, many times, the kingdom of heaven lies within you. And the keys to that kingdom are not in any pope's hands or any priest's hands. They wanted you to go through them because of power. It's all about power and control. And if you could basically convince somebody that their only way to heaven is to listen to what you say, boy, do you have a lot of power. Don't you? I mean, when you think about that. So there's a lot more here. I'll have all the links for you guys. I'll put them in. So, and talking about Fatima, the vision of Fatima. And a lot of people believe in it very, very strongly. And so you see, because Fatima is a very apocalyptic message, it says that no matter what happens, there's going to be terrible wars, going to be diseases, whole nations are going to be wiped out. There's going to be 3 days of darkness. There's going to be epidemics that will wipe out whole nations overnight. Parts of the earth will be washed away at sea, and violent tornadoes and storms. Not really a nice message at all. That was Father Malachi Martin talking about the real third secret of Fatima. Because we were told by the church itself that, well, the third secret of Fatima was going to be an attempt on the life of John Paul II. Nah, I don't think so. But really, what do we have here? Well, we have the same message that we see from the Hopi. We have the same message that we see from, say, Mother Shipton. Same basic message we see from Peter Dunov. We've seen in more recent times, Henry Groover has had that vision. Other people have had the visions as well. This is universal. It's not in any one particular faith. We could look to Hinduism and the coming of Kalki as well. On the 13th of July, they received a message that was to be given to the Pope in the year 1960. Lucia fulfilled the promise, delivered the message, but the Pope decided after some time the world was not ready for it to be published. But really, it's the same message again that has been given by so many others as well. Now, this one, the timelines are off, if this is what they really said. And this is talking about the third prophecy. And it just basically states that if man does not turn from evil and place himself at the feet of Christ, the planet would self-destruct and events described in the book of Revelations would come to pass. It further stated that a child would be born who would unite the world with a plan for world peace and a false religion beginning in 1992. And and I understand there's going to be people that are Catholic, and I was brought up one, that are going to thumbs down or unsubscribe. And it's more important for people to know, so do we have the true religion here in the Catholic Church or in any particular church, really, when we get down to it? Because all the other churches that we have, for the most part, are coming out of the Catholic Church, even if they have branched off. Of course, we had the whole Reformation. So what really is false? What really is false? I mean, do we view the Catholic Church as Christ-like, or do we view it as more anti-Christ-like? When we look at it as a whole. So again, I think there's been so much misdirection going on. There's always misdirection. We have to ask ourselves, well, who's in control of the world? Well, the Bible tells us Satan is. So, what's the biggest religions in the world, organized religions? And we could look at that, and if Satan's controlling this world, then you would think Satan has an influence on the religions and the politics again, and creating that divisiveness by telling us there's only this way. Go out and, convert everybody to this one true way. And I had so many debates with Jehovah's Witnesses back in the day when they'd want to come in, and would eventually come back with somebody else that was a little better versed, and come back with somebody else again until they got too frustrated and just avoided the house. But here we see, by 1995, the people would discern that this person that was uniting the world for world peace and in a new religion was evil, and indeed the Antichrist of biblical prophecy. World War III would begin in the Middle East in 1995 with an invasion of Israel by the united Arab nation using conventional weapons, which would culminate in the nuclear holocaust in 1999. Between 99 and 2003, most of life on the planet would suffer horribly and die. Return of Christ would occur in 2011. So, that didn't happen, obviously. And this is more about the third prophecy, which it says, the third prophecy is basically, it's just about John Paul and the assassination. And many people thought, wow, that's a bunch of bunk. That's totally not what it is, and we could tell that you're covering it up. But we could just look to other prophecies again, look all around the world, and then compare, and you'll see, we are going through a period of cleansing. This whole system has to be changed, not just changed, it has to be eradicated. So we are going to go through a cleansing, and we're going through that now.
A lot of us really are, and it's a difficult time because we're learning that everything we ever thought we knew is really a lie, and it's hard to face. It's difficult to face, but it's growth, and it's beautiful, and that's what is supposed to happen right now. This is the Great Awakening, and it's becoming clearer and clearer every day who the controllers are, what they control, and how they do it. And the more clear that becomes, the more clear it becomes how we should move forward with our own lives to free our minds from these belief systems that have chained us down for so many years, us and our parents and our children. And it's really cool that we have these beautiful children who are born with the ability to see auras, their second sights in place. And I think the diet that they feed us, though, is really going to create a lot of problems for these children. There's just so many things that are happening, and it's, even though it's difficult time, it's a beautiful time.
Yeah, it's a major change in consciousness. And so, I'm very aware, and have been since, probably like 1976, of the whole traditional fundamentalist viewpoint on how things are going to go down. As we see this end of the world, Jerusalem third temple fulfills biblical prophecy of the end times. You have to build that third temple. Again, there's all these lines of thinking, but the thing to recognize is that, again, everybody has these prophecies. We're all tapped into a collective consciousness. And, there are people that have been able to tap in and see visions of what's coming from every nationality, every race, every creed. And there are saints of every denomination, as we've talked about. We were talking about the holy men of India that can do amazing things, the yogis that can even levitate or go without eating or drinking. But then we see there's Catholic saints that could do the same. So there's people of absolute pure heart and beautiful shining light in every tradition. So it's not so much about the tradition, it's about the love in your heart, the compassion, and where your vibration is, where your personal vibration is. So while we're always looking for that second coming of Christ in an exterior way, it's got to be kindled on the interior. That's the change that will actually change the world. If we all were like, the example that Christ gave, then we wouldn't have these wars. We wouldn't be controlled in this way. We wouldn't be so easily manipulated. And this was just talking about the Balfour Declaration, the hand of the Rothschilds, as they go about creating and fulfilling these prophecies. And so we get back to Barron Trump and everything. Time travel? Time travel, UFOs, aliens, ETs, what's really going on here? And so many will say, well, it's just the hand of Satan. But, the word Satan just means the adversary. Who is the adversary? Well, Satan's the adversary. Yeah, but that just means he's the enemy. Who is Satan, really? Well, you could definitely say the Illuminati are definitely if not the generals, they are definitely part of the satanic army that we see out there in the world. Most definitely there is a dark cabal that needs to be taken down. And, hopefully that will be sooner than later. I think, as me and Cindy have been getting and feeling, we feel that the takedown of these dark energies is going to happen before all the earth changes are done. The earth changes will still be ongoing after we've mostly eradicated ourselves of this dark energy that has been controlling the planet.
Yeah, and the light is going to come through, and it's going to purify our hearts, and it's going to be a difficult process, for some a painful process, but a necessary process. So I think it's really important to embrace what we have coming and accept it and acknowledge it for the beautiful thing that it is. A lot of ugly things are happening, but that, if we keep in mind, that's to try to control us and keep our vibration down and keep us from going within, then you come to an understanding that things they really are not as they seem.
If we look at the Anunnaki creation stories, they want to take credit for the creation of man. But in reality, God lies within all of us. Again, how could we do greater things than Christ if he was the only Son of God and the only Son of Man? So, that's the big message in many of the Eastern traditions. It's self-realization, realizing that source isn't everything. So I think most would agree that God is omnipotent, all-powerful, omniscient, all-knowing, and omnipresent everywhere. So obviously that couldn't be. That would create a conundrum unless God was in all of its creation. It's just that simple. It's just logical. And we can experience this when we go within and spend enough time working on ourselves within. And we can experience that divine love. And it's an amazing bliss that is indescribable. And Cindy knows it very well.
Yeah, it's an interesting feeling. It's something that just sort of comes over you, and you have this peace-loving feeling. It's better than any drug I could ever imagine, but it does come through us. And I think more and more people are going to be feeling that bliss where nothing can ruin your day, nothing can upset you. There is no wrong. And I think if we all work on ourselves with a lot of meditation and mantras, then we can all reach that.
So, if we look at what the traditional pictures and stuff of Satan looks like, often, he's pictured with that pitchfork. Satan, devil. Right? Pretty scary, pretty creepy and everything. And then we look at the Draco, pretty creepy, pretty scary. I could see these guys holding a pitchfork. When we recognize that there's statues of these beings on both the Americas and over in Sumeria as well, so on totally different points, opposite parts, exact same statues, exact same likenesses of these beings. And we recognize, some beings perhaps have the ability to actually change their own vibration, perhaps pop in and pop out. We talk about demonic possession. Well, a being with that type of technology could definitely overshadow people, and they do. And this is just one type. But, we also have seen the Anunnaki depictions. And what we have gotten is that the Anunnaki are, at least Enlil and Enki and the like, kind of a hybrid, a human reptilian hybrid. And all the depictions we see of them creating humans there, and you see the Pope there kind of morphing into a little bit of a lizard man. But also, there's depictions where humans are in, like this one, they're all chained together, and you have these much larger beings with the humans as slaves. Now again, they might have altered the vessel, but they didn't create our souls. They didn't create our essence. And, we are of source, just like, all of the other creatures in creation. So we're not really lesser than. We just didn't have we don't have the technology that they do.
Right. And we don't have the knowing that they do. We don't have the understanding that they do. And that's really important to remember when we're walking through this awakening process. That can be very, very difficult. Is there's things that we just don't know, and we need to cut ourselves some slack, because sometimes we get up against walls with our belief systems and our true essence or our true emotions, and it can really throw us for a loop. And be good to yourself, be fair to yourself. Just know that there's a reason you're feeling what you're feeling, and even if it's a bad feeling, it doesn't mean it's bad.
Exactly. So, know thy enemy, because it's the enemy of humanity that has been keeping us in the darkness, not really understanding the full picture of how things are. But as we've said, we are now rising into a new area, a new time, and the shackles are going to be freed, and we're going to rise up and create a new world. And that's something that's not to be feared. The old world is what needs to go. It does need to go. The old system needs to pass. And that is going to pass. And so, of course, it isn't going to happen without them doing everything they can to waylay us. But we do have to keep our vibes high, and we have to realize that we're all in this together. And we have to pull for each other and band together as best we can to support each other in every way and get past our dogma and our political division, and stop blaming each other for things and recognize that we're being manipulated by beings that don't have ours or the planet's best interest in mind.
That's a whole lot of truth right there, is that they don't have our best interest in mind. And it's not their first rodeo, and they have an agenda to keep. And it's definitely not for us to be healthy and happy.
Exactly. And so, yeah, I see Nicole is saying even the trees have auras. Everything does. Even rocks do. Even though you might not think there's any sort of life or consciousness in rock, there's consciousness in everything. Everything. Consciousness is the fundamental thing. And everything else is a manifestation for consciousness by consciousness. That's the ultimate reality and the ultimate truth. And we are connected. There is quantum entanglement. So, we were working on people today all over the globe. We work on people regularly, and we're in United States, but we work on people in New Zealand and in Australia. I've worked on people in Africa, India, all over the UK and Europe, South America as well, Asia. We're all interconnected because they feel the energy as soon as we start to work on them. It's all part of the science that has been purposely hidden from us, but it's all becoming, it's the apocalypse. Everything's going to be unveiled. And thank you, feel free. And that's a beautiful statement right there. Feel free, because, the reality is, we do hold our destiny in our hands, because it's all about how we react to things. And so as they're feeding us with more fear to keep us in lower vibration, we understand the bigger picture. More and more people are waking up. We understand the manipulation. And we are eternal beings having a human experience. And when the judgment comes at the end of our life, the person that's going to be judging you is you. And then you will make the choices on what you need to work on, along with the laws of karma, karma and the law of cause and effect. And we go on. And that's the beauty of it. Life goes on. This is all about learning and overcoming. So guys, thank you so much. As always, we love you guys. Stay as prepared as possible. Keep your vibes high. Thank you for your support on Ko-Fi and Patreon. And if anybody needs any sort of energy work or wants to have a session, reach out to us at evolutionaryenergyarts@gmail.com or EEARTS@protonmail.com. We love you guys. As always, God bless and namaste.